Let's talk about how to embrace the lean mindset. I'm not sure why, but all the variants of lean seem to have come to the conclusion that this pillar-based house is a good representation, and it's really an important metaphor though. So what you see in the house is you see the roof is value, and certainly we want to know a little bit more about value, but value is supported by 4 pillars: respect for people and culture, flow, in our case flow, right? This is our addition to the House of Lean. And innovation, we have a great set of new works from Rees and others on thinking about the lean approaches to development. Relentless improvement, Kaizen, continuous improvement, call it what you will. I call it relentless improvement because I want to make sure that there's a strong focus on that. Well, what supports value? The pillars. What supports the pillars? Leadership. And here's a fundamental difference between a lean paradigm and an agile paradigm. The agile paradigm is based largely on the values of the team and supporting the teams, and we certainly understand that. But the teams can't change the systems around that. Leadership can. So the approach to lean in leadership is different. Leaders lead a lean transformation, and this is going to be a key difference that we're going to exploit again and again throughout both the course and throughout the actual implementation. We can't do this without our leaders. They can't be impediments, just the opposite. They have to be someone who is proactively addressing the impediments, maybe even before the team discovers it. So let's look in a little more depth at each of these. The simplest one is value. We're all up for value, right? Well, we have a very simple definition here: achieving the sustainable shortest lead time. So I addressed a PMO organization some years back, and there was some debate about whether Agile was a fix for their problem. They certainly had problems in terms of delivery. And I said, I don't know if Agile or Lean is the right thing for you. I said, those are the things we understand best. Those are the methods that we use now to address quality and productivity. But my goal is simple. We want to achieve the sustainably shortest lead time. And if that's your goal, then this is going to be a good conversation. And if not, I'm probably in the wrong meeting. And they said, okay, we don't know yet about the rest of what you're going to propose, but we agree on the goal, so long as it includes the fact that it's best quality and value to people in society. It's not simply, over the dead backs of our production workers or our software developers or the people that build our widget, right? And we need to provide value to those folks as well as society as a whole. And we want to do so with morale and safety and customer delight. And you see some of the kind of Japanese roots to lean thinking here. Let's not just have the customer be okay with it. Let's create a great thing for them, a high quality thing. And we want high morale and safety. And safety in the old lean days, that was manufacturing safety. That was safety from repetitive motion syndrome and plant and manufacturing and just really the physical dangers the large manufacturers achieved. In our world, that's kind of intellectual safety. That's the ability to make a mistake. It's the ability to be wrong and make a correction. It's the ability to operate in a safe environment where we can expose our flaws, our strengths and our flaws, and work to improve them both. Respect for people and culture. One of my favorite quotes was from Drucker back in the 80s. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. No matter what we think we're doing, okay, culture will take our strategy and chew it up and spit it out. So we have to be conscious of that. So we want respect for people. People do all the work. We're a society based on people. We are people. We work for people. We deliver value for other people. And culture is how our values are reflected inside the organization. So we certainly want respect for people and culture. And what does that translate to? Well, I already mentioned this one. People do the work. Let's just recognize that. Thank you, Mr. Person, for being helpful and doing that piece of work that others can enjoy. Now, Lean does have a slightly broader discussion about the customer than Agile does. The customer for an Agile user story is the person that uses the user story. But that doesn't really scale. That doesn't tell me that if I'm building a big piece of middleware, who's my customer, and frankly, if there's 1,000 people building a system, there may be one customer in that system, there may be 1,000, but most of the developers won't see that person. Most of the stories will not directly relate to a single individual. Many will, okay? And in some cases, on the front end, a lot will, but mostly we're involved in, parsing web pages or updating data tables or persisting some data, something to the database. So Lean has a broader view. Your customer is whomever consumes your work. So if I'm a dev tester pair, not an unusual construct at all, well, we consume each other's work. The developer consumes the work of the tester. Yes, that test case did or didn't reflect the right thing. Let's take it from a slightly different view. Let's say you're a traditional organization and you have development on this side and you have, ops and deployment on this side. Now, this is not DevOps. It says DevOps, but that's not what it is. This is development and that is ops. So now let's just look at this and say, I'm a development team and I've created a bunch of new value. Here's my giant new set of value. Okay, and I'd like that to be deployed. These guys over here, they're working on as many 9s as you care to list, reliability, okay? I'll just use that. That's actually very reliable. They're working on that level of reliability. Our developers have created a bunch of new content. Is it as reliable? Of course not, it's undeployed. So we look across the chasm here and say, you're about to impose all this really cool and innovative new stuff on a system that I'm accountable for this level. Well, we need to do it. Has to happen. What are the rules? Don't overload them, right? That looks like overload to me. I don't know about you. Don't make them wait. We said we were going to be ready. We're not ready. Don't force them to do wasteful work, right? Wishful thinking and wasteful work is one of the key wastes in lean. Don't do that. Now, the same goes for your customer. The same goes for a developer to a tester. The same goes from a development team to the product owner. The rules are the same. If they consume your work, they're your customer. Don't overload them. Don't make them wait. Don't force them to do wasteful work, and don't impose wishful thinking, no matter where you are in the chain. And that means that when you think about the value stream, you have a whole different notion now, right? My customer might just be the next step in the value stream. My customer might be the person who enters the purchase order. Well, the customer is the purchaser. Well, yeah, they are. But I'm building a system and somebody needs to enter that order. So my customer is that person that enters the order. Goodness gracious, I thought we all worked for the customer. We do. But in this case, in this value stream, my customer sits right here. What are the rules? Very simple. Don't overload them. Don't make them wait. Don't force them to do wasteful work. Don't impose wishful thinking. This is a critical difference in terms of a traditional approach to Agile in the user story and understanding the construct of the flow of value through the enterprise. We need a broader set of rules for what our customer is. What else? Build long-term partnerships based on trust. If you read, in particular, Deming's work, you'll read a lot about the whole notion of somewhat traditional, and he would say somewhat, kind of Western world-based win-lose negotiations. You wouldn't believe the price I got from that supplier. I got their lowest programming cost rate. Wow, that's awesome. You got their lowest cost rate. Did you get their best people? Well, not sure, but it's a really low rate. These long-term partnerships are based upon trust. As a supplier to an organization, let's just talk about code for a second. Their code goes into my code, right? It goes right up in there. It becomes embedded. It's integral. Don't I want the highest quality stuff? Don't I want relationships with partners that build high quality stuff? And this is in my system. Don't I need them? Is it like, okay, great, we hired you, good to go. I ran into a situation that was really odd where a fairly large XP shop, about 25 people or so, were maintaining a really big system. And they were probably the most advanced XP shop I'd ever been. This is 6 years ago. And I walked by their wall of fame where they had automated everything, and they had shown every imaginable, current defect rate, current closure rate, build cycles, percentage of the time the build was down, percentage of automated test coverage, very sophisticated. And then I saw this nightmare of the defect rate. And I asked the question, I asked the quality manager, I said, how can a shop that seems to be this mature have this many defects? And he said, well, you don't understand our construct. Right? We're venture-backed. Our company raised a lot of money. They went to Eastern Europe. They procured this large system, right? They did a really great deal. They spent $7 million. We now own that system. The relationship with the people that built that is gone, and we're trying to figure out what this thing does and how to fix it. So that's not a long-term partnership based upon trust. That's just the opposite. I hired these folks down here to build a system, and then it's like, hey, thanks a lot, handshake, let's go. Doesn't really work, okay? So that's building long-term partnerships based upon trust. This might be a surprise to you. Cultural change comes last, not first. Well, what do we mean by that? It means that you can wave a flag all you want. I remember walking into a big, one of the big telecommunication companies, and they had some signs, important signs for them that were flying in the lobby, and one said innovation. And I went to a development team and I said, what does that mean to you? And they said, this is the least innovative place I've ever worked at. There's no time to think. We're being pecked to death by a flock of ducks. We're absolutely overtasked. Everybody's tired. We're largely burnt out from the last release, and now we're on another one. And oh, by the way, don't forget to innovate. That's not innovation. That's not leadership. Maybe it's a vector, but in the end, if it's not feasible, that's hypocrisy. So we want to understand that in order to change the culture, we have to get results, and we don't want to start with that. Yes, we need leadership, and yes, we do need vision. But if we're exhorting people to things they can't do, and we don't change an environment, the systems environment that allows them to do that, then we're going to be looked at as hypocritical managers. And yeah, innovate, but oh, by the way, I just dumped 5 more things on your desk, and we have to ship this next Thursday, whether you think it's ready or not. Cultural change comes last, not first. To change the culture, you have to change the organization. So if you want the culture to be more supportive of an agile way of working, you have to change the organization such as more capable of operating in an agile way of working. And what I didn't put on this slide, but it's straight from Kotter, is a heads up for those of you. So heads up, people. Here's the bullet I didn't put. In order to change the organization, you sometimes have to change the people. Okay? That says in any organizational change management structure, not everybody is going to go along for the ride. We certainly hope they will. We want to give them every single opportunity to do so. But if this is your change, and this is something that is absolutely important to you, it may be necessary to change the organization, and in some cases to change people to accomplish that. So that's respect for people and culture, a key pillar of the House of Lean. Let's talk about this flow pillar. That's just unique to SAFe. I've never seen a House of Lean that has a pillar for flow, but we certainly do. Kind of a controversial quote down here on the lower left. I'll talk a little bit about one of my mentors, Don Reinertz, in a second. Pretty bold quote. Operating a product development process near full utilization is an economic disaster. Wow, that's thought-provoking. Guess we better understand what he means by that, because what utilizations do we operate our product and software development processes at? 100%? 110%? What does Reinertson say? Well, maybe he's right, maybe he's wrong, but if he's right, that's a pretty important statement. So what is flow? Optimized, continuous, and sustainable throughput of value. It's not a stop and start. Stopping and starting is difficult. We want our system to run like a well-tuned manufacturing plant, right? Or a well-tuned industrial chemical plant. It's running all the time. There's always input, there's always output. Stopping and starting trips people up, creates overhead, causes resource shuffling, etc. Keep things running. Avoid start, stop, start project delays. You do not see the word project in SAFe other than on a slide like this. We don't believe that the projects are the right metaphor for achieving agility or product development flow. So we don't use them. We use other ways to get things done. We use other terms for that, and instead of having projects basically of short-term work for short-term people, how do you scale that? 1,000 short-term works for 1,000 short-term people? That doesn't really work. We're going to eliminate the word project entirely and think about continuous product development flow. Build quality in. It's not just, hey, quality is free and quality is cool and we should really do quality. Yeah, right. You can't flow without it. Why not? Because you're revisiting the past. Every time you revisit the past, you interrupt flow. So if you want to keep a continuous flow of value, quality is a requisite. And that's why, in the traditional, in the manufacturer's adoption of Lean, there's the andon cord. What's that? That's the cord that any production manager can pull. I don't like what I'm seeing in my widget. Stop the line. Holy cow, you've stopped the entire production line. Yes, I have. I'm empowered to do that, and I don't want to make any more of this error. Okay, I'm seeing this problem. So if we build quality in and we have the ability to stop the line, then we can stop building work in process that suffers from poor quality. We can stop building stories on top of stories that don't work, or features on top of architectures that don't work, and we're dependent upon that. So quality isn't in there just because it's fun and we know customers like it. Quality is where we get our flow and in the end our economics from, and that's why that focus on quality is so critical. Understand, exploit, and manage variability. Gosh, we live in a highly variable world. Whether we like it or not, we like to think of this as applications development. Isn't it research and development? Well, there's no research team, so who's doing the research for our new application that's never been built? The developers are. So there isn't a separation of concerns. That means that everything we do has an element of research mixed in it. And in order to manage that, we need to understand, exploit, and manage variability. And this is going to be a critical thought when we get to the principles lesson, which comes up next. Understand it, exploit it, and control and manage variability. We live in an uncertain world. Nobody's ever built a system like this. When I had all those people raise their hands, how's your big system going? And they said, pretty badly. If you looked at another root cause, it would be because nobody's ever built this before, including us. Well, that's just a wake-up call. This is not making widget number 7. This is building a SaaS-based solution for something that's never been SaaS hosted before. Nobody's ever done it before. We need to understand variability. Integrate frequently, daily when we can, hourly if we can, every 3 seconds if we can. And as we move forward with SAFe and move forward with some of our ongoing systems development work, we're going to talk about strategies for improving the frequency of integration. It's pretty easy to be on a single platform, a single LAMP stack Java platform where we have all the great tools. Maybe I can do continuous integration. Maybe it's a struggle, but that's not going to be the same if I have 4 different systems that must be integrated. So we cannot necessarily say we have continuous integration, but we can darn well integrate very frequently, and we need to do so. Informed decision-making via fast feedback. As we visit the principles, we're going to see that again and again. We're going to talk about plan, do, check, act. Well, don't plan a lot, don't do a lot, because if I do, it's going to take a long time before I can check and act. PDCA is going to be our major kind of mental model for the basic scientific method in software development. Plan, do, check, act, give me some feedback. So that check is the fast feedback part. Now let's talk about innovation. Innovation comes from the producer. Wake up. So customer doesn't innovate. Customers will rarely drive you to an innovative state because they don't understand the nature of that state and they don't envision necessarily how that innovative state is going to solve their problem. They tend to think incrementally from where they are now. But what do we learn from Eric Ries and others in the whole lean startup? And let's combine them with Edwards Deming. Producers innovate, customers validate. Now I get the model. We innovate, customers validate, and we want to do it really quick, right? We want informed decision-making via fast feedback, and we have to integrate frequently to be able to do that. Get out of the office. Gemba. No useful improvement was ever invented at a desk. For those of you who don't know the theory of lean, Taiichi Ohno is one of the godfathers, if you will, of the whole industry. Interesting guy. Be fun to read his story. He worked at Toyota Looms and went to Toyota Manufacturing after World War II. And he and some peers were largely responsible for the move from Toyota to become the world's largest and highest quality automotive manufacturer. And his quote, "No useful improvement was ever invented at a desk." What's Gemba? Seeing down here below. Gemba is the real place where the work is actually done. It's a Japanese word. I don't use very many Japanese words because it just isn't helpful to have to leave the English language to find an important concept. But this is an important one. And let me give you an example. So if you're watching, one of those Japanese versions of NCIS, and yeah, those exist, you might see a situation where, where the detective is in the field and he calls his boss and talks to his boss and say, "Hey boss, I'm at the scene of a crime here. I'm in Gemba." I'll just use G for that. What's that mean? It means I'm standing over the dead body here, okay? I'm not confused about whether there's a dead person. He or she is right here. I have full situational context. Okay, well maybe that's not a particularly fun story, but in any case, it does tell us what Gemba means. I had a situation just this morning. There was a policy issue that came up in the company, and I'm directly involved in policy. Certain types of policies are pretty critical, wrapping around IP and courseware. And there was a difference of opinion about the way to address this policy. And I had my opinion, but I waived my opinion. And the reason I waived my opinion is that those who had the opinion were in Gemba. They were working directly in the situation. They had full situational awareness and context, right? They knew everything that was going on. And I'm in a recording studio and I could pretend like I know more about that than you do. I don't. So I simply said, look, that's your decision. You are in Gemba. So you're the ones that have to make that decision. Get out of your office and don't invent SAFe or anything else at a desk. Find out where the people are. Time and space for creativity. As leaders, we have a responsibility. If we believe in innovation, if we believe in unlocking the intrinsic motivation of knowledge workers, then we're going to have to provide time and space for creativity. And that vignette that I gave you before, if that doesn't exist, then innovation won't happen. We're going to build that in a couple different ways in SAFE, and I think you'll see a pretty bold statement about how important that time is and how we're going to create it systematically, because without it, innovation can't happen. Sure, there's serendipity. Sure, people think about stuff on evenings and weekends, but if they were collaborating at work and they had an hour or a day or a week to say, we're facing some interesting problems, let's think. When was the last time you thought? Did you think of something? Okay, of course you did. And thinking and working together and basically brainstorming and bouncing good ideas off of bad ideas and combining two ideas in an even better one is where our creativity comes from. Apply innovation accounting. Now, I refer you to Eric Ries's work, The Lean Startup, for that. Innovation accounting basically says the stuff we want to measure, let's just say ROI, are basically late economic indicators. By the time I get the ROI, it's too late. It's 2 or 3 years later. What do I need to know? Are people clicking on this web page? Are people finding their way to the blog? Are people deploying, the minimum possible essential elements of SAFE? What's happening on the inquiries? Where are they addressing SAFE? Is anybody going to the portfolio level? How many times has the value stream expand button been clicked? Those are the types of things that tell us about our user way before anything is monetized. Now, that's just our own example, but you have yours as well. And if you're an enterprise that's thinking about innovation, you have to think about a different set of accounting rules, because the ones that we use, which is our project cost accounting and ROI and investment, are the wrong rules to tell us whether we're on the right track or not. And also from the Lean Startup, they have this word pivot. This is a phrase I just like to use a lot: pivot without mercy or guilt. What does that mean? It means we've learned something new, we're not going to do that anymore. Well, I thought you said it would probably work out like this. Oh, it didn't, okay? Excuse me for being wrong. That was an idea. We tried the idea. It didn't work. We're moving down a new path. No mercy, no guilt. Nobody's going to worry about the sunk costs of that. Make a change when you need to make a change. Pivot without mercy or guilt to a better course of action. And those are key takeaways from innovation. Relentless improvement. Now, why not Kaizen? Kaizen means good change. We called it Kaizen for a while. We called it continuous improvement for a while. But I think relentless improvement is just pithier. If I sit down with any manager and I ask, are you doing continuous improvement in your organization? What's the answer going to be? Yes. If I say, are you doing relentless improvement? And they say, what do you mean by that? I say, can you name an initiative right now that has people dedicated to changing the status quo to a new state? Well, maybe, maybe not. So relentless improvement is a little bit different. Relentless improvement has a constant sense of danger. Gosh, we're in a competitive market. I teach a lot of classes, and there's people in there that compete with each other. So there's no birthright to continue to be the most successful company in their space. As a matter of fact, others, it's free market. For all practical purposes, it's an unrestricted, worldwide free market with universal access to businesses and consumers worldwide. Okay, that's a dangerous place to rest on your laurels. Optimize the whole, not the part. Relentless improvement, we have to take a systems view. It's a whole nother topic. Consider facts carefully, then act quickly. So it's not a matter of, simply a bias for action, although it's partially a bias for action. It's a bias for action once there are sufficient facts present to have some confidence that the action is a good action. And if you're moving very quickly and the action isn't a good action, what do? Take a different action. Pivot. Move forward with that. Apply lean tools to identify and address root causes. We're going to work on a couple big ones, the retrospective and the root cause and corrective action problem-solving workshop. We're going to spend some real time on that because we need a real tool. Not just we stood up and we did what went well and what didn't and we picked a thing. Let's do real root cause analysis and figure out what we can actually do to create better outcomes in this process. Reflect the key milestones and identify and address shortcomings. Built right into the manifesto, built right into SAFE. Iteration retro, inspect and adapt at the system/program level, inspect and adapt at the value stream level. Those are our key milestones. Our PIs, our iterations on our PIs and the feedback we get are key milestones, and we're going to reflect there and we're going to identify and address key shortcomings. And by the way, we're going to do that systematically. It's not going to be, oh, by the way, we had an inspect and adapt It's going to be what were the results of the last inspect and adapt, and how is that correlated into the new plan. Leadership. We talked about this, and I think one of the most important quotes in this entire work is this one. Again, right from out of the crisis, people are already doing the best. The results that you're frustrated with are not because people aren't trying. They're doing their best. The problems are with the system. We have to change the system. So how do my people change the system? Well, they can't necessarily. Only management can change the system. So I worked as a developer for about a decade. I worked in the environment I was given, the language I had the compilers I had the system I had the unbelievably limited storage compared to today, and I couldn't change any of that. That was the system. I did my best in there. I didn't always get great results, in part because the system was a problem. So people are already doing their best. The problems are with the system. Only management can change the system. What does that tell us? It means that we need to lead this change, not just the individual systems that support the development process, but we need to lead the change of moving to a new way of working, because that is our largest system. We need to know the way, right? Managers who know how to do what we need to do and who emphasize lifelong learning are the type of managers that can support and foster organizational change. We'll talk a little bit about various management styles over time, but as management expert, we might look at that and say, oh, that's not necessarily a perfect style. Well, you know what? Manager as dummy isn't a perfect style either. So thinking about working with people who actually know how to achieve the objectives is a very meaningful thing. Develop people, they do the work, right? We don't worry about the system as managers and executives. They do that. We worry about the people. And if we develop the people skills and give the people the support they need and make sure that the goals and objectives are clear, they'll develop the system. Inspire and align with mission, minimize constraints. This is kind of a synthesis of 5 or 7 different perspectives in the lean world that basically says our job is to provide the mission, get out of the way. So minimize the constraints in the mission. We have some constraints. I'm developing a new point of sale system for a tire retailer. Well, I'm not going to ignore PCI requirements for credit card processing. Those are industry standards, and frankly, they lower my cost of credit card transactions. And if I ignore them, 2 things bad can happen. Number 1, I can pay too much for the credit card fees, or worse, I'm liable to be hacked and have all those credit cards exposed. That's a constraint. We're not going to be shy about that, but we want to make that clear. But how they accomplish PCI, or how they interpret it, how it works in a particular environment, and the other development lifecycle issues, the milestones, minimize those constraints, and then there's more operating freedom for our teams to find the mission. Decentralized decision making, a key tenet of lean. We'll talk more about that. That's one of the principles we're going to talk about very shortly. Unlock the intrinsic motivation of knowledge workers, another key principle. These last 2 are 2 that appear on the 9 Lean Agile Principles of SAFe. So I needn't belabor them here because we're going to get to them very quickly.